All right, thanks for joining us today for our webinar hosted by Terabase Energy and featuring our friends from Transect. Today, we're discussing the importance of environmental assessments for large-scale solar development and how the combination of our softwares can help you mitigate project risks and improve your decision-making during the early stages of development. We'll begin our webinar with introductions from our presenters to be followed by some background on the broader topic of environmental assessments. Whether or not you deal with this topic directly in your role, it's a critical step in the development of any project, and someone upstream or downstream from you is doing it. Today, we're going to demonstrate how to bring this analysis a couple steps closer to you and your team, empowering you to make better decisions early on and reduce the risks of unexpected permitting delays, excessive civil work costs, lower than expected solar capacity, etc. Finally, we'll close it out with some key takeaways, and then we'll open it up to your questions. Feel free to submit those questions anytime during our presentation. With that, I'll hand it off to our presenters.
Thanks, Rafal. So my name is David Spieldenner. I'm Director of Sales at PlantPredict, Director of Sales of PlantPredict at Terabase Energy. I've been in the solar industry for about 18 years. A large portion of that I spent with First Solar. I've done everything from building software to manufacture solar panels to running the IT organization at First Solar's EPC and development business. And most recently, I've been running the PlantPredict product here at Terabase Energy. And so I've probably spoken to many of you who are on the call at some point or another, as I do a lot of demos on a day in, day out basis. And I'm just happy to get an opportunity to do this presentation today. So hand it over to Doug.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Doug Brown. I serve as the Director of Product Design here at Transect, which means I get to have a lot of fun reaching out to our customers, really understanding the needs of solar developers and what all their workflow entails, and then coming up with great products to help to come alongside that, to support that, and as we'll discuss today, really understand environmental risk early. So thanks for having me, guys.
All right, thanks, Doug and David. Since we have a diverse audience of developers, engineers, environmental consultants, and other job roles watching this webinar, we'll set the stage with a quick overview of our companies, starting with Terabase. So if you're not familiar with us, Terabase is a Berkeley, California-based company founded by solar industry veterans that's using its expertise to develop technologies that are reducing costs and accelerating the deployment of utility-scale solar. We have software for solar modeling, plant design, pre-construction and construction. We offer SCADA and power plant controls, and we're deploying robotics-assisted construction automation. But today we'll be discussing PlantPredict, which you see on the left side of this slide. So PlantPredict started off as an easier to use cloud-based alternative to PVSys with more advanced features like sub-hourly modeling, and it's continued to expand ever since. Following our acquisition of the software, we're expanding it into a robust toolkit for the early stages of solar development before your project goes into the CAD engineering phase. And you'll see several of these tools used in our workflow today. I'll pass it on to Doug for a quick overview of Transect.
Great, yeah, so a little bit about Transect. Transect came from the passion of our CEO, who actually started from an environmental consulting background. And so she spent some great time in figuring out exactly what the needs of customers were and where the environmental sort of assessment piece fit into the development process, and eventually moved on to creating Transect as sort of a productization of some of those consultant findings. From there, we've kind of moved on to really, again, understanding what is the entire life cycle of the solar development process, and how can we help to quickly locate viable sites, and then pinpoint early risks that you may find in order to bring those things to light sooner rather than later, so that we can streamline the site assessment workflow to really help folks find the right sites faster.
All right, I'm going to hand it back to you, Doug, in a second, but first let's do our first poll question of the day. How how do you perform the initial environmental assessment for your project site? In-house environmental engineer, environmental consultant, Transect software, PlantPredict's built-in map layers, or do you not do environmental assessments at all in your role? We'll give this a few more seconds and then I'm going to share the results. Looks like we have some Transect users already. All right, a few more seconds here. And let's take a look at the results. We see 31% of the audience here is already using Transect software, and some of you have environmental consultants and engineers. So with that, let's discuss. Let's have Doug discuss the importance of environmental assessments.
Great. There we go. Perfect. So happy to see some Transect users on. So I'm looking forward to demoing here in a little bit and showing how this fits into the PlantPredict workflow. But before we get into that, let's talk at a high level at some of the advantages of understanding of environmental risks and doing an assessment early. So identifying those risks early, what we're discovering is it really helps to kind of bring to the surface potential bottlenecks or issues that could become critical if they persisted until later in the process. So there's a huge value to knowing, what are the things that might blow this project up. What that does is then leads to an improved workflow. So the earlier that those understandings can come to light, the sooner they can be either addressed or you can choose to disqualify a site that you might have moved forward on, which can be very costly. So working with environmental consultants, those things can sometimes take, weeks to get those back. Can be pretty costly. And what Transect is seeking to do is allowing you to get that sort of desktop report on potential environmental concerns much earlier in the process than you would have otherwise. Now, the practical upshot of that is you can see their strategic land acquisition. What happens is we're learning that developers who use tools like Transect and PlantPredict to uncover things early and really get a sense of the land and how it's going to work for their project, they end up not only being way more informed, but moving forward with projects that eventually do come into development. And so with some of our users, we're learning that like 75 to 80% of the sites that they bring under control, they actually move forward to building. So there's a big strategic advantage to learning more sooner. Talk about a little or some of the common permitting and environmental issues that folks come up against. First is long permitting timelines. And so the more that you can understand what sort of permits are going to be required, the more you can know are those pretty standard permits that you're familiar with, or are those permits that might have an extended timeline because they're discretionary. So depending on the features of the land that you choose, some of those could be discretionary and really extend timelines in a way that you don't expect. The other is species. So not only what are the known species on a piece of land, but one of the things that Transect can do is look for potential habitats that might yield species. So give you more of an advanced view, not only of what's known, but what could potentially be there. Then things like changing regulations, really understanding like how do things like the recent Sackett ruling change what a wetlands delineation may be, and how might that affect my project now or in the future. Then unforeseen environmental issues. Are there things on this land that might, even beyond what's known of things like wetlands and waterways, will help to check for things like ephemeral streams, which might be seasonal, that could impact where you choose to build and what parts of your site are actually buildable. And then finally, we find that often if you're a developer who works in a particular region, you may know that really well. Transect and tools like Transect and PlantPredict can be particularly helpful when you're moving into a different region or an area you're less familiar with. You can get a quick snapshot of the potential concerns that you might experience there.
All right, thanks, Doug. Before we jump into our next Doug's demo here, let's do our next poll question. When looking for land for your next project, what is most important? Single landowner, distance to interconnection point, land cost or availability, terrain difficulty, ease of permitting. Give this another 15 seconds or so. And then Doug will go into a demo where he'll be showing how to select your optimal piece of land using Transect. All right, few more seconds. And looks like the most popular option here, let's share that, is your distance to interconnection point. All right. Doug, we'll let you jump into your demo.
Perfect. And give me just 1 second. I'm going to bring up my screen sharing here. So let's hop in here and get our hands dirty with the tool a little bit. So I'm currently in Transect on our map view. Now, for the sake of this demo, imagine that I'm a solar developer looking for a site in New York. And so here I am in Columbia County, and we saw that it was popular in the poll to start with what's distance between your transmission lines and substations. So what we can do is just click into this parcel filter. And just for clarity, all the lines you're seeing on the screen right now are those individual parcels. So let's choose to be within a mile of a transmission line or substation. And I'll apply this. And great, you can see even just by applying that filter, we get a quick visual of where those substations are. And so we can see some parcels collected around those. We're off to a great start. So now why don't we, the less landowners, the better. And so the larger parcels, the better, obviously. So let's go to size here and choose a parcel with a minimum acreage of around 20 acres. And you can see we're starting to filter things out and get to a site that looks like it's going to meet our needs well. Another thing that we can do, if we like, we can just go in, turn on our transmission line and substation layers here, and we can visualize those. And sure enough, those are right within the center of those parcel clusters that we have. Another thing to note before we choose our individual site, we recently added a feature where you can combine these parcels by landowner. So this was a highly requested feature. Just being able to toggle that on and then seeing, here's combined parcels that may then actually meet the criteria of that filter that you just applied. So we may have lost smaller parcels, but because those are owned by the same person, that makes it really easy to visualize and find those. So I think we are getting to a place where, yeah, this site in here seems to have a good amount of open land and a great proximity to our line and substation here. So once we find a site that seems to work well and meet those criteria, I can simply come in and create a boundary. So if I wanted to choose the individual parcels there, then I could do that and select all of the parcels that I wanted to include in my project. Actually, I already have this one ready to go. And so what I'll do is just switch over here to the existing project I've created that we're going to walk through today. So this is my Transect Terabase demo. And as you can see, by turning this project on, I can start to see some high-level important information about it. So you can see that there are some concerns. And again, very important to have a sense of what are the environmental concerns that you might run up against early. And so you can see here, even as we're starting to make our initial assessment of a site, we can switch over and look at our risk at a glance, which is showing that site and parcels around it. So it looks like there may be some concerns here at a high level. I'll click into that individual parcel. And again, I'm now seeing very particular information about who is the owner, what's the high level assessment of the buildability of the site, where's the nearest transmission line or substation, and even down to the levels of risk. So we can see there's some high concern on waters here, but things like protected area are pretty low. So great tool for getting a fast assessment of a site that looks like it would work for you. So the next thing we can do is hop over and run a report. Again, I've already run a report on this one just to save us some time so you don't have to watch that load. So now that we've got a site chosen, if I view my report, and by the way, that doesn't usually take more than a few minutes to run that full assessment and get to the kind of granular data that you're seeing here. So we've run a report on this site, and now if we wanted to really get into what is the buildability of the site, I can click into my buildable area here. And this buildable area is completely customizable based on the criteria that you're looking for. And so you can see I've turned on a few things to exclude here, like railroads and roadways. If I wanted to, I could also filter further by slope, but we'll get to that in the PlantPredict side. And then things like what waterways and wetlands to assess quickly what is the buildability of this site selection. After I've got all of that done, we'll kind of come back to the rest of the report later, but I think we're good enough now. We've got a pretty solid understanding of the site that I'm looking at. I can simply click export, go down here to Terabase PlantPredict, and that will export exactly the file that we need for things to be imported into PlantPredict. And I'll hand things over to David to take us the rest of the way on that side.
All right, David, before we hand over the KMZ file to you, we're going to launch our last poll question of the day. What environmental issues cause the biggest problems for your projects? Endangered species, protected areas, water or wetland concerns, topography, or unexpected local regulations or restrictions? Once again, we'll give that a few more seconds. And if you do have any questions, submit them now, and we'll be getting them to the end of the webinar. All right, let's take a look at the results. We have a clear winner here of water and wetland concerns, and David will show how to address some of those and create constraints for those in his demo. David, go ahead.
Thanks, Rafal. Thanks, Doug. All right, let's evaluate the site. So like Doug had said, we're looking for a project site that we could fit around 50 megawatts of solar on, but we're willing to go down to about 20 megawatts. So let's see how that site does. So because I have a KMZ file from Transect, I'm going to hit import project, and I'm going to say import from KML KMZ. I'll grab that KML file that Doug sent me. And you can see it's here in New York. I'm going to hit Save Project. Now create new prediction. I'm going to do this as a map builder prediction. So I'm going to say build on the map. And I'm going to go into the PV blocks and arrays section. So we call this the map builder because we build our power plant on a map. We start off in a terrain view. We give you two choices between a terrain view and a satellite view. So if we switch over to satellite view, you'll see satellite imagery on your screen. Now I'm going to click Upload Data, Upload KMZ Data, and I'm going to specify that I'm pulling in a Transect KMZ file. We've got these Transect KMZ files coded in a way that PlantPredict will understand what shapes are boundaries and what shapes are constraints. So when I click that and hit Submit, it's going to come in, and you can see we got our boundaries and a few constraints already laid out into the site. Now I'm going to click on our map overlays and just show you, since wetlands was such a concern, we're going to bring up a wetland layer from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And you can see we've already avoided, thanks to Transect, we've already avoided all the major wetlands. Next thing I'm going to look for is floodplains, see if there's any flood hazards that we need to be concerned about on this site. As I zoom back, you'll see we do have some floodplains over near the Hudson River that show up right there, but nothing really to worry about on this site. So that's a good thing. All right, we're going to look at the transmission line and substation layer. As was talked about earlier, we're focusing on this site because it's near a transmission line and a substation. We do have a transmission line that goes right over top of the site. I'm going to click on that. It gives me some information about the transmission line. I can adjust my setback, and I can hit create all constraints. It'll automatically create a constraint for me for that transmission line. So now I'm going to turn those off, and I'm going to jump over to our power plant parameters, and it's time to run our capacity assessment. And I'll zoom out a little bit on that. So first thing I'm going to do is add an inverter. I'm going to use a 3.15 megawatt central inverter. And then I'm going to use a 540 bifacial module. I'm going to put in that I'm looking for 100 megawatts just because I want to fill this site and I don't really know how much solar will fit on this site. I'm going to say 40% ground coverage ratio. I'm going to use a horizontal tracker, and I'm going to eliminate my north-south roads, only use east-west roads. And now I hit this update DC capacity, and in just a matter of a couple seconds, it's going to evaluate the site and come back with a capacity assessment. So down here under site specifications, it's telling me I can fit 82 megawatts DC or 69 megawatts AC, which is way over my target, which is good news. So the next thing I'm going to do is that was kind of an aggressive assessment because I was only using a single string tracker. I'm going to model this with a 3-string tracker. I'm going with a 1 by 84 tracker table. And let's see, so now our capacity has dropped. It's down to 62 megawatts DC, 53 megawatts AC, still within my target. But you can see we can't fit our trackers into these tight spaces like we were able to before. But I'm still feeling pretty good about this site. So the next thing I want to do is evaluate the topography. I'm going to click on the 3D view button. And what this is going to do is it's going to bring in elevation points for this entire area and do a quick topographical assessment to help me understand what kind of topography I'm dealing with on this site. So as I zoom out here, I'm going to turn off my wireframe mode. And we can see here, if I turn off my DC layer, there's a lot of red and blue blotches. This is telling me where there's high slope areas. So we've got some high slope around these streams and up in this northern section. Another thing that I can do is turn on terrain slope banding. This is going to show a different color for each level of slope. And you can see if I zoom out, we've got some big open areas with low slope, but then a lot of slope over here on the eastern and northern and western side of the site. Now I can turn that off, turn on my DC layer, and I can also do a post height analysis. So this is a really quick analysis to say, let's look at these posts and tell me if the post is less than 3 foot from the ground to the tracker table, it's going to show up with a red dot. And if it's greater than 5 feet, it's going to show up with a green dot. And you can see up here in this northern section and down here along this streamline where some of our issues are going to exist. So the whole point of this is to be able to do quick, indicative, easy terrain analysis. All of this data, once you do the 3D site view, does get brought into your 2D map. And it shows up under our map overlays as well. So if I turn off my DC flood, we can see our post analysis. I'm going to scroll down here. Our post analysis is showing us the red being cut, the green being fill. You can see where the cut and the fill is mostly. It's in that northern section and along this little stream. And then our slope constraints here, the blue is representing north-facing slope, and the red is representing south-facing slope. I can turn that on and turn that off. Okay, so at this point, what I'm going to do, the best way for me to mitigate some environmental concerns is to reduce the amount of earthwork that I've got to do. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump out of PlantPredict. I'm going to go into Design Pro, and we're going to do some evaluations on what kind of a cut and fill is required on this site, and then see if there's any way that we can completely eliminate earthwork altogether on this site. All right, so I've pre-ran some simulations on this site, and we're going to just walk through those. All right, the first simulation that I ran, you're going to see here, I did a very simple optimization. So I was targeting 50 megawatts AC. You can see all of these come in at 47.25 megawatts AC. And I increased the DC-AC ratio from 1.0 to 1.1 to 1.2 DC-AC ratio. The way that we were able to increase the DC associated with these scenarios is we increased our ground coverage ratio. So our ground coverage ratio went from 31% to 33% to 36%. Now you'll notice the energy yield goes down as the GCR and DC-AC ratio go up, energy yield goes down. The reason why that is because you have more shading and more clipping loss associated with your system. Next, we're going to notice that the grading on this site is around 200,000 bank cubic meters. So the hills that we were seeing within PlantPredict are real, and the only way we're going to be able to build on this site in these scenarios is to do quite a bit of earthwork. Now, looking at our costs, as the DC goes up, our cost per watt actually goes down because we have more DC to spread those costs over. And then our LCOE, when we look at this, you'll see it started off at 0.0618, went down to 0.0603, and then went back up to 0.0608, telling me that the 1.1 DC-AC ratio and 33.4% ground coverage ratio is our most optimal scenario out of these three. All right, so now let's go into the Terrain Pro and let's see where that 200,000 banked cubic meters of earthwork is, and let's see what we can do to try to reduce that. All right, so Terrain Pro is taking every post location from our Design Pro layout and it's laying it onto a map, and then it's using our tracker parameters that you see over here on the left-hand side, and it's doing an earthwork assessment. It's going to do cut and it's going to do fill. You can see up here in the upper right-hand corner, our 202 bank cubic meters. We have 112,000 bank cubic meters of cut, 90,000 bank cubic meters of fill. But I'm going to focus most of my attention on this disturbed area number. So I'm going to switch this over to Imperial so that we can see these numbers in acres. You'll see that right now we're having to disturb 95 acres of land in order to build this 50 megawatt power plant, which is a lot. It may be too much. It may be more than we'll be able to get permitted to go with. So I've got some serious concerns. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to try to reduce that number. One way we can do that is we can adjust our pile reveal window. So I've already ran a scenario where I went from 12 inches to 24 inches. When I click on that, you're going to see we go from 265 bank cubic yards or almost 100 acres down to 58 acres just by being willing to extend our post lengths by an extra foot. So we're willing to go at 4.5 to 6.5 feet with our posts, and that takes our disturbed area down to 58 acres. Another thing we could do is we could use terrain following trackers. So if I was going to use a terrain following tracker that was allowing for 1.5 degree articulation at each post, we'll be able to take our disturbed area all the way down to 26 acres. So now we've gone down to like a quarter of the earthwork, or at least a quarter of the disturbed area, just by using a longer pile reveal window and using terrain following trackers. And you can see this represented on our heat map here within the screen. All right, but still 26 acres is a lot. So I may still have some issues. So another option I could do is maybe I avoid that northern portion of my site. And what I've done here is ran a scenario and I just excluded all land north of this one transmission line. So now I'm focusing on the southern portion of the site. I'm using my 33% ground coverage ratio and 1.1 DC-AC ratio that showed up to be optimal. You'll notice my grading is down to 16,000 banked cubic meters. And if I open up Terrain Pro, we're going to see how much disturbed area we're dealing with. So we're down to 26 acres of disturbed area. So we reduced the amount of capacity that we've got on this site, but in doing so, we've also reduced the amount of disturbed area. And we're still using the standard rigid tracker with a 0 maximum slope change and only a 12-inch pile reveal window, but that's a way that we can get down to that 26 acres of disturbed area. Now, what if I brought in my 2-foot pile reveal window and my terrain following trackers and focused on this southern portion of the site? You'll notice my total grading is now down to 1365 bank cubic meters. And when I open up Terrain Pro in this scenario, check this out. My disturbed area is now down to 1.96 acres. So at this point, I am only disturbing a little under 2 acres of land in order to build this project site. So this is looking a lot more constructible. Now I'm going to use some of the tools within Terrain Pro to do a little bit of analysis. So I'm clicked on this cut fill map. You'll see it brings up all the post locations, and then we show red meaning cut and blue meaning fill. Now if I click on this icon here, it's going to show me my rack projection. And when I click on one of these racks, it's going to show me my rack profile over here in this profile viewer. You can see that this rack here, I'm going to close this so that you can look a little bit closer, is real close to this little stream that flows through here. And it looks like that tracker is placed in a way that it kind of falls off this cliff. So what if I spent just a little bit of time and extended out my constraint areas so that I avoid some of these areas where I have some cut and some fill? Well, we did that. In this scenario here, I just extended my exclusion zones out away from that little wetland. I took myself away from this little ridge line that you see coming in here. And now when I open up Terrain Pro, we're going to see that although 2 acres of disturbed area was great, 0.1 acre of disturbed area is even better. So now we've gotten it down to virtually no grading whatsoever. So the best way to avoid damaging the environment is to leave the environment as is. So the only area that requires any kind of cut and fill, which is kind of funny, is this one little section here. And if I click on this tracker there, you can see there's like a little bit of a, it looks almost like a stream bed flowing through there. I can use this little keyboard to navigate to the rack to the east, and then go one more to the east. So you can see these 3 tables have a little bit of a fill in there, and then by that table, you get rid of it. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about this. At this point, although I'm down to 22 megawatts AC, 24 megawatts DC, I know that I'm not gonna have to do hardly any earthwork on this site. That makes me feel like my environmental risk has been reduced pretty significantly. However, there may still be some other environmental risks associated with this site. So I'm going to come back over here to PlantPredict. I didn't do this earlier, but I just want to showcase this feature. We built into PlantPredict an integration with Transect. And so let me show you how this works. As soon as I get a site boundary laid into PlantPredict, this Transect integration becomes active. I can click this Get Site Assessment, and what will happen is PlantPredict will reach out to Transect's database and give us back a quick environmental assessment for this location. So it's telling me, although PlantPredict is calculating around 300 buildable acres, Transect is telling me you really have about 75 acres that is truly constructible on this area. Some of the biggest issues are going to be protected species, waters, as we are aware of, being a high risk. Luckily, we don't have any protected public areas on this location, and there is some environmental compliance concerns here as well. I can get more information. Once again, this is available to anybody that has a PlantPredict subscription, whether it's individual, business, pro, or enterprise. You can click this Order Mini Report and get a free mini report from Transect for that site. All you have to do is upload a KMZ file. So I can use the same KMZ file that I've been using. Click Next. Fill out this information, and there will be a button here that you click off. It'll send a message to Transect, and Transect will follow up with an email containing that mini report. At this point, what I'm going to do is hand it over to Doug, and Doug's going to show you what you can expect on one of those mini reports. And he's also going to show you what a full report for this site is going to show you. So with that, Doug, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, David. All right, fingers crossed. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Perfect. So yeah, as David said, you can get one of these free mini reports directly from there in PlantPredict. And to show you a little bit of what that will include, we'll send you this via email, which gives you some information about the site that you're considering there. So some obvious things like the size of the AOI and how many acres of this is buildable, down to, again, what are the nearest transmission lines and substation, how many owners might you have to contact. And we'll even show you, there's 7 possible species that might show up as far as federally protected species to consider. And resulting in 4 permits and regulations, we'll show you the first few of those species that may show up on your site there. And then all of these additional sections, what are the potential waters concerns? We see that, again, changing regulations can always affect a project. The Sackett versus EPA ruling might affect some of the waters that you have on this land, so that might be included in things to consider around your permitting there. And then down to protected areas and environmental compliance. And within this mini report, we'll even show you the first kind of handful of potential permits that may show up. So you have 19 possible permits. Here are the few that you would likely need to consider kind of early on in that process. So would encourage you, if you're interested in getting one of these, they are free. Feel free to do this directly from Terabase or from our website. But to give you a bit of a flavor of what you can expect via a full Transect report, you'll notice it looks very similar to what we showed on the mini report, just with a whole lot more of the detail filled in here. And so as we get down into our executive summary, one thing to note, and I'll do a little bit of a demo of this here in a bit, but we are recently, we've put out our solar pulse feature, which helps you understand some of the possible sentiment towards solar in the area. So I'll walk through that here shortly. But also our concern assessment now has full detail on here are all of those species of concerns to consider. And within waters, here are the permits that were triggered based on the waters that you have on that site. For any of these, we can go in, expand down and see what's the potential timeline. So what are the implications of this permit and who are the regulators? And all the way down to your state species and are there any potential federally owned lands that might show up on this? So it looks like we're clean from kind of that standpoint. And again, this is just the executive summary. It's kind of the tip of the iceberg of what all you can find. This is, clicking over, we can see the full permit matrix, which will go into a lot of detail on each of these. So, if we were looking at one of these permits, again, who are the regulators and regulations? What are the links to those regulations, potential timeline implications, and even some of our recommendations on how to mitigate this permit. So what do those next steps look like, and how do you move forward with your project? So a huge wealth of knowledge when it comes to what we have on the permitting front, but also, a ton of additional resources here. So if you wanted to get into your site and understand what are the potential soils that may show up, or, this is very popular, what's the information around the parcel owners and how do I see those parcels on an individual site? Well, you can get a table of all of those owners, even click in and see which of these sites does this particular owner own. So lots of great stuff that you can find within the Transect report. Again, very excited. We recently released Solar Pulse, which allows you to get a sense of, what's the sort of news in the area. So for Columbia County, is there any known news that might impact sort of the viability of a site, either positive or negative towards solar? What are other solar projects that exist in the area? So are there other projects near me? And where are they in their stage of development? And we even have ordinances. So if there are known moratoriums, we'll show you the moratoriums in that area. And we work to summarize any ordinances and help you understand what's the jurisdiction of that ordinance and what's an easy summary that I can read. And if you like, you can always click out and see that full ordinance. So trying to really use features like this to, again, mitigate against what are all of the potential bottlenecks that we might experience on a project, and how can we bring those to light as early as possible and sort of do some of the initial homework of getting an understanding of what those concerns might be. And then the last thing I'll note is we also have, a financial incentive section. So if you want to get a sense of possible incentives or tax credits that might apply to your project, we can help you click over and calculate those quickly. So that's kind of a quick and dirty run through of what you can expect from a full Transect report. very easy to generate these from within our product and then export them as very easy to read and understand PDFs, or you can export those individual map layers or share with other members of your team so that they can review those reports and you can collaborate on choosing how you move forward on that site. So this has been really fun. We've gotten to see, initially what it would look like as a solar developer to go from the stage of finding a site that seems to be ideal within the Transect platform. We refined our buildable area a little bit, and then David was able to take that into PlantPredict and really model some of those scenarios and what all would be required in order to finally bring us back here as we're progressing through our project to see if this looks like it may be a really viable site. What are some of the other potential concerns that we might address? And we were able to do that all very quickly and cleanly with a combination of Transect and PlantPredict.
All right, thanks, Doug. If you have any questions, submit those now, and we'll get to them in a couple minutes. I'm going to do a couple more slides here. So some key takeaways today. As you saw, David and Doug's demo, there was a lot to discover about this particular piece of land and some big decisions to be made before you get the ball rolling on this project. And while this kind of data has been around and accessible on the internet for a couple decades now, it's only been in the last couple of years that software like Transect and Terabase could generate these custom insights for you in minutes, not days or weeks. As you saw, it's difficult, expensive, and time-consuming. Keeping up with all these permitting regulations and all these data sources while trying to build up your project pipeline. Using traditional workflows, your buildable area estimates might not be accurate. So this gives you some more detailed information about that. And finally, as you saw, with these long permitting timelines and other issues, if you miss one of these things, you might discover, 12 months on that your project is, might not make financial sense anymore. So what we're doing with Transect and PlantPredict here is we're breaking down the silos between the developers, the engineers, the environmental experts, so that you can make these optimal decisions right at the beginning of development when environmental issues are easiest to address. And whether you're using one of our solutions at the moment, whether you're using Transect or PlantPredict or neither, we hope you see the value of incorporating this combination into your development workflow. And since both apps are very easy to use, you or someone on your team can easily get started doing this analysis for your entire project pipeline. All right, so before we go into Q&A, some more. Here's how to learn more about our products. If you're interested in PlantPredict, visit plantpredict.com, where you can schedule a one-on-one demo with David, and he'll go through your specific use case, pull up your project. Or if you want to request a trial, you could get started on your own. And if you want to learn more about Transect, visit their website, transect.com, and you could also schedule a demo there and get a sample report for one of your current projects. All right, let's jump into some Q&A. All right, does Terabase have a large list of manufacturers? So I think that's referring to the inverters and the modules. David?
Yeah, sure. So we do have thousands of inverters and modules. However, we do not make it like our business to try to keep up on the latest modules and inverters that are coming out. Most of the module manufacturers and inverter manufacturers require you to sign an NDA before they're going to share their data with you. And so that really limits what we can put into our database. However, any of our subscribers have the ability to upload PAN files and OND files that they've gotten from the manufacturers and build out their own inverter and module library. The process to do a PAN file upload is very simple, very easy. And most of our customers just build out their own library. And getting the data from the manufacturers is not very hard. Like I said, you usually just have to sign an NDA, and then they'll share with you the files that you need.
All right, thanks, David. Question here, are subsurface mineral estate layers or information available in Transect or Terabase? In some Western states, the surface and subsurface estates are severed.
Yes, we do have some subsoil information within the product. And so that was something that was added recently. And I may have to reach back after the call to find out exactly what that data source is. But we do have some soils information and kind of subsoil stuff.
All right, I have some questions about pricing for both Transect and PlantPredict. David, do you want to talk about PlantPredict?
Yeah, gladly. So our pricing is all can all be found on plantpredict.com. So on plantpredict.com, there we have a pricing table that's available. Uh, our subscription plans range anywhere from an individual subscription that's as little as $125 a month, all the way up to enterprise plans that start at $20,000 a year. I'm just going to flash up onto my screen real quick the pricing table just for everybody's benefit. And so, yeah, we're incredibly transparent with our pricing. And so definitely you can see now in my demonstration, I started off in PlantPredict. PlantPredict is what's available in the individual and business plans. And then later on in my demonstration, I jumped into Design Pro and Terrain Pro. Those products are only available in our Pro and Enterprise suite. So in order to see everything that I did today, you would need to subscribe with a Pro plan that starts at $7,500 per year, but you do get 3 user licenses with that subscription. So, all right, I'll hand it over to Doug to talk about pricing for Transect.
Great, yeah. We're actually reviewing some of our pricing information now. And so we have sort of a per seat license agreement right now for our pricing. And I honestly don't remember at the top of my head what our baseline price begins at. I can ping somebody on this call if they're available to answer. But we have sort of that as a baseline that allows you the map and the ability to run those reports. And then we have some additional things like the solar pulse feature that I showed that is sort of additive to that. So we can keep answering questions and I'll try to get a more solid answer on base pricing.
Since you mentioned the solar pulse, somebody here asks about the pulling news about solar projects and regulations, and they're interested to know if you could retrieve permit applications submitted to U.S. agencies.
Not yet. We don't currently have the ability to pull the permit information back, no.
All right. Question here about, let's see, something about how many, can you pull how many trees would have to be removed for a project site? So tree coverage.
Yeah, Doug, do you have anything like that?
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick. I'll show this. So what we can do, and again, there's a huge depth of information available in a Transect report under kind of our supporting resources and docs. And so we mentioned soils, just to touch on that really quickly. You can see all the various soil types and some of the soil depth information here, but you also have things like land cover. And so once you've run that report, you can see I've got my map up here. If I want, I can look at, here are particular types of land forest. If we wanted to see where our wetlands or where our forest coverage is, you can click and it'll actually show exactly where on that site that's showing up. So yeah, we've got sort of a big depth of information of where all of these various pieces are showing up and what the area is. And I believe you can export that also when you customize that buildable area by sort of feature that you want to exclude. I think we can also show you what the total area of that feature is.
That's really cool.
All right, before we go to the next question, somebody asks if this video and webinar will be available. Yes, we will share a video of this recording with all registrants. All right, next question here. Are there any provisions for substation drops from high voltage transmission lines?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Rafael, could you repeat that?
Are there any provisions or analysis for substation drops from high voltage transmission lines?
Not yet. We do have some information, so we're working to gather more data on that. But right now, yeah, we can show things like, what's the high level capacity of that site, but we can't show, or of that line, but we can't show the drops yet. No.
All right, David, for you, can PlantPredict work with PVSys data?
Yeah, so I already mentioned like pan files and OND files. Those are so like if you have pan files that you've harvested for PVSys, you can take those into PlantPredict and build out a module and inverter library with those files. We do not bring in like a PVSys like project file. We don't have that capability. Um, and so we have a lot of information because this is a really hot topic. Plant Predict's actually been around since 2010, and we've done countless studies doing comparisons of Plant Predict and PVSys over the uh, 14 years that Plant Predict has been working. Most of the research and data started really heavily in 2016, and we have within Plant Predict we have some independent engineering reports that go over the differences between PlantPredict and PVSys. We're very active in the PVPMC community. In fact, we're going to be at the upcoming PVPMC conference here in May in Salt Lake City, where we're going to be presenting, and also we're going to be there as participants in PVPMC's blind modeling competition, where the folks at Sandia Labs put on this competition to compare modeling tools like PVSys and PlantPredict. What they did is they provided specifications for a project, and then they had actual performance, like actual like production data on the project site that they were speccing. And then we compared the modeled results with the actual performance, and PlantPredict just really performed well. Really blew everybody out of the water in that analysis. So we're pretty excited about that. So yeah, it really is thought of as a modern alternative to PVSys. It's cloud based, it does sub-hourly modeling. It's using the latest software technology that's real complex. We have an API, so you can interact with it via Python. It's got all these benefits that modern companies and software developers are used to. And so, yeah, that's what we got.
So I'll do one more question. For any questions we haven't answered, feel free to ask those when you close down this webinar or follow up in the email, and we're going to, individually reply to all questions that you submit. But one final question here, David, since you mentioned API, somebody's asking about APIs for desktop GIS. So David, you mentioned API for PlantPredict. What other integrations are there on your side, Doug?
Yes. So the Terabase PlantPredict integration and kind of being able to export that exact KML for that use case was one of our first in this area. So we're excited to have that partnership, but we are still kind of exploring APIs and other various integrations of how to get information out sort of our system. So right now we do support, shapefile, KMZ, KML, even AutoCAD, but we don't have sort of any direct integrations via API at this time.
All right. Any other file formats you want to talk about for importing or exporting?
Those are kind of the big ones on the Transect side.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll jump in on that. So within PlantPredict, the file formats that you can export out of PlantPredict is obviously KMZ. So your layout and everything you can export in KMZ, and it'll include all the different layers that you want to include. We also have DXF if you want to go into AutoCAD. We also have Shapefile if you want to go into Esri ArcGIS. We also have some other things like an OBJ file export, which will be like a 3D model. And then we have lots and lots of like Excel-based exports, like your 8760. You can get full nodal data showing you all your loss factors on a time series basis for your DC side, AC side, transmission, all that stuff. So there's just an absolute wealth of information that can be exported out of the software.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks, Doug. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Once again, feel free to leave some feedback or questions as you depart the webinar. And thanks for joining us today. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.